Hey everyone, it's Sunday night, so doing another video here. This one I wrote back in March of 2014, March 29th, 2014, so more than 5 years ago, and I titled it Ponderings on Antichrist. And it started with just an interesting piece of information that I learned, and then I just kind of built off of that. And I've been excited to get into this one as I read it earlier this week, just because it's real straightforward, simplistic knowledge that anybody can research for yourself. And so I'm going to reference a lot of different things. You can just jump on Google and you can type it into the search engine, and you can see for yourself the truth behind these things that I'm going to state. So I was pretty excited about that, about how easily it is to piece this together, and how easily referenced it is, and you can just follow along on your own. But it's pretty eye-opening information, and it's just kind of continuing on with the theme of the last several weeks here, the last few weeks, exposing the teachings of Roman Catholicism, and so we're going to continue on in that direction. As always, before getting into it, I just want to pray, and so if you guys want to pray with me, I'd appreciate it. Lord, as always with these videos, I ask for humility, that I would not be proud or lifted up, or that I would not focus on how many views I get, or who watches this or who doesn't, Lord. I find that in my heart, Lord, I seek the approval of men, and I'm often looking at those likes and the view numbers, and just the wicked heart, Lord, how I want attention, and I want some sort of glory in this, Lord. And that's evil. It detracts from you, Lord. And so I pray for humility, Lord. I pray that you break me of that you break me of seeking the approval of men, that I lift my eyes to you, that I see myself as dust, Lord, just a broken vessel, nothing of no value to speak these things, Lord, but you choose to use broken vessels, and so I praise you for that, Lord. And you use David, who was a murderer and an adulterer, and you use Moses, who was a murderer, and Peter, who seemed to struggle with pride, and Paul, who persecuted your church, Lord. And so I thank you that in spite of our faults, Lord, that you still choose to use us. And help me to lift my eyes off of self and lift them to you, Lord. I'm always edified by doing these videos, Lord. It's always good to talk about you and to talk of truth, Lord. It always just seems to refresh me, seems to feed my spirit, Lord, to talk about the things of you. It brings me joy. It brings satisfaction. It's a worthwhile endeavor, Lord, while so much of my life just seems pointless and vanity, Lord. But when we speak of you, when I take time to talk of you, and to speak of your glory, and to look into your word, and to look into your truths, Lord, there's value in it, there's substance in it, there's joy, there's purpose, Lord. And so I thank you for that, Lord. I thank you that you've provided an opportunity to talk about you, and a means to do so, in print and in video, and just in any other way where we can glorify your name and lift your truths on high, Lord. So I pray that in spite of my faults, in spite of my sins, in spite of my unworthiness, Lord, that your name is glorified, that much is made about you, that the truths that come from you in this video and all the videos I do, that they magnify you, Lord, that anything that's erroneous, anything that's false, anything that's in error or contains my pride, Lord, that it be dismissed, that it be looked past, that it go in one ear and out the other. But whatever's true, whatever's good, whatever's holy, Lord, that it stick in our hearts, Lord, that that it edify us, that it magnify you and your word in both my life and anybody listening's life. And Lord, we pray for the Roman Catholic people, those stuck in that tradition, Lord, that you would bring them out. And you would glorify yourself in that as well, Lord. I love you, Lord. Be with me as I read through this article. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, so again, this one's called Ponderings on Antichrist. And I'm going to go through something I discovered a while back, and I'm just going to take you through it the same way that I thought it out logically, and I'll give you the references so you can search this out on your own. As always, you should never just take somebody's word for something. You should look into it for yourself and see whether or not these things are true. Because you don't know, me from Adam. I could be a liar and a deceiver, so you want to make sure that you research things for yourself and test all things by the light of the scriptures to see whether or not they're true. If you can't watch this live or you can't catch the whole thing, subscribe to my YouTube channel and you can watch it at your convenience. I usually get these posted right after I'm done doing the live video. My YouTube channel is King Ram 417. It's K, my middle initial, Ingram, my last name, 417. And you can watch this and all my videos on there. All right, so without further ado, I'm just going to jump into this here. Point number one, if you look in the Roman Catholic online encyclopedia, it will refer to the Pope as the Vicar of Christ, or the Vicar of God. In Latin, the title, because Roman Catholicism is based in the language of Latin, the Roman language. And so in Latin, that title, Vicar of Christ, Vicar of God, is Vicarius Christi, or Vicarius Filii Dei. As a matter of fact, in the Roman Catholic document called the Donation of Constantine, the phrase Vicarius Filii Dei is used, which means the Vicar of God, or the Vicar of the Son of God. And you can go to the Catholic Encyclopedia, and you can type in their search engine, Vicar of Christ, and you can see that for yourself on the online Catholic Encyclopedia. So point number two here, the word vicarious in Latin means substitute. And you can Google the Latin dictionary and type in the word vicarious, and you'll see that word means substitute. So point number three here, the word substitute, when you look up the definition of it in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, and you can Google that, the word substitute means in place of. So point number four here, just following along my train of thought, if you translate the word substitute, which is what vicarious means, if you translate that word into Greek, which is the language of the New Testament. It's the language the New Testament Bible was written in. So the word substitute in Greek is translated anti. And you can go and Google, well, actually, you can just go to an article on Wikipedia on Antichrist and look at the etymology of it. And I'll just read it to you here, what it says on Wikipedia. Antichrist is translated from the combination of two ancient Greek words, anti and Christos. In Greek, Christos means anointed one, which is the word Christ derives from it. And anti means not only anti in the sense of against or opposed, but it also means in place of. Therefore, Antichrist opposes Christ by substituting himself for Christ. So, point number five here, and here's the bullet point of what I'm trying to get at here. The phrase Vicar of Christ, which Roman Catholicism refers to the Pope as the Vicar of Christ in their own Catholic Encyclopedia and in the document, the Donation of Constantine. The phrase Vicar of Christ, or Vicarius Filii Dei, or Vicarius Christos, in Latin translated into English means substitute of Christ or substitute of God. And if you take that and translate it into Greek, the language of the New Testament, it means anti of Christ or anti of God, anti-Christ. So that's what that phrase vicarious phila Dei means, is anti of God, vicarious Christos, anti of Christ. So point number 6 here, the Catholic Encyclopedia itself identifies the Pope as the Antichrist when it calls the Pope the anti of Christ or the vicar of Christ. So now let's get into something here kind of just mind-blowing and pretty exciting as well. Do you remember Roman numerology? I'm sure you guys at least are rudimentarily familiar with it from high school or from grammar school. They would teach us the different Roman numerals, and you can actually Google this. You can Google on Wikipedia Roman numerals, and it'll show you a little graph of what the different letters mean. But now, point number 8 here, let's look at Revelation 13. In verse 18 it says, "Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Now a score is 20, so 3 score would be 60. So it says 660 and 6, 666. So this verse specifically says to count the number of the beast. So it's implying a mathematical formula. It's saying, add the number of the beast, count the number of the beast. Math is involved. And the number of the beast is 666. So point number 10 here. What is the numerical value, the Latin, the Roman numeral value? And remember, the Roman Catholicism is based in the Roman Latin language, so Roman numerals apply to Roman Catholicism. What is the numerical value for the Latin title Vicarious Phila Dei? Now I'm going to tell you how to spell that so you can do this on your own. You can see this for yourself. Vicarious is V-I-C-A-R-I-U-S. Phila is F-I-L-I-I. And Dei is D-E-I. So if you apply Roman numerology to that title and ascribe a numerical value to each of those letters, some of those letters don't exist in the Roman, in the Latin Roman numeral calendar or whatever it's called, the graph. So when that's the case with Roman numerology, the number 0 would be applied. So the letter V has a numerical value of 5. The letter I of 1, C of 100, A would be 0, R 0, I 1, U 5, because U and V are synonymous in Latin. S would be 0, F would be 0, I would be 1, L would be 50, I would be 1, I would be 1, D would be 500, E would be 0, and I would be 1. So now if we count the number of the name, just like the verse tells us, we have, and grab a calculator here and add this up for yourself, 5 plus 1 plus 100 plus 0 plus 0 plus 1 plus 5 plus 0 plus 0 plus 1 plus 50 plus 1 plus 1 plus 500 plus 0 plus 1. And then if you hit equal on your calculator, you're going to see it adds up to 666. So we have a man, an office, the Pope, that calls himself Vicarious Phila Dei. And the book of Revelation in Revelation 13:18 tells us that we can count the number of the beast and add it up, and it adds up to 666. Vicarious Phila Dei, when you add that up with Roman numerical values, equals 666. Now I'm going to reference, if you haven't watched my video on the Whore of Babylon, please go back and watch that. Revelation 17 talks about the whore, Mystery Babylon, and it gives a perfect description of this whore. It gives clear identifying symbols And it specifically identifies Roman Catholicism as that whore. It identifies Roman Catholicism as Mystery Babylon, the woman who sits on the beast, the woman who controls the beast, the woman who rules and reigns over the beast and directs the beast. And in Revelation 17:9, it says that this woman sits on 7 hills. We have a man or an office that sits on 7 hills. Okay, well, if you go into the City of Rome's website, you can go to welcometorome.net, and you can see that Rome is specifically identified as the city on 7 hills. It sits on 7 hills. I don't have the names of them all, but you can go to that website and you can see. I'm just trying to see here quick. Templa Gionin, Templa Viova, Templa Giova. I'm horrible at pronouncing these things, but you can see that Rome is identified as the city on 7 hills. And in Revelation 17:9, it says that this woman sits on 7 hills. In Revelation 17:6, it says that this woman is drunk with the blood of the saints. If you go to thebibleantichrist.com, and this is just one source, there's numerous sources. You can just put in your Google search engine Roman Catholic persecution of Bible believers. But one spot you can go is thebibleantichrist.com, which is the-bible-antichrist.com. And you can see their article on Roman Catholic Church persecuting Christians. And just one quote here off that website. During the reign of the Papal Church of Rome, tens of millions of Christians were persecuted and killed because they refused to bow to the authority of the Papal Church. The reign of terror lasted 1,260 years and was prophesied in Daniel 7 and Revelation 13. This will happen again when the mark of the beast is enforced. Below are quotes from history describing the most awful persecution at the hands of the Roman Catholic Church. And then it says, these quotes are not to cause to upset, but to expose the Papal Church for what it really is. You can read Fox's Book of the Martyrs, and you can see the persecution that Rome, during the Dark Ages, she killed millions of Bible-believing Christians. Some were killed for simply owning a Bible. A lot were killed for refusing to bow down and accept their wafer, their magic cookie, as the actual body of Christ, and their cup of wine as the actual blood of Christ. But it says that she's drunk on the blood of the saints. So whoever this whore is in Revelation 17 sits on 7 hills and has murdered numerous Christians, and Roman Catholicism fits both of those. In Revelation 17:2, it says that this whore commits fornication with the kings of the earth. And spiritual fornication is just union, some sort of union. And so this woman, whoever she is in Revelation 17, has union or fornication with the kings of the earth. And you can, again, go to Wikipedia and look up the foreign relations of the Holy See. The Roman Catholic Empire, and you'll find that, let me just read here, the Holy See, as a non-state sovereign entity and full subject of international law, started establishing diplomatic relations with sovereign states in the 15th century. It had the territory of the states of the Church under its direct sovereign rule since centuries before that time. Currently, it has the territory of the state of the Vatican City under its direct sovereign rule. In the period of 1870 to 1929, between the annexation of Rome by the Kingdom of Italy and the ratification of the Lateran Treaty established by the current Vatican City state, the Holy See was devoid of territory. In this period, some states suspended their diplomatic relations, but others retained them, or established such relations for the first time or reestablished them after a break, so that the number of states that did have diplomatic relations with the Holy See almost doubled in the period between 1871 and 1929. The Holy See currently has diplomatic relations, or fornication with the kings of the earth, with 183 sovereign states, including the partially internationally recognized Republic of China and in addition with the Sovereign Entity Order of Malta and the Supranational Union, European Union. The Holy See has also established official diplomatic relations with the State of Palestine. So Roman Catholicism has relations with the vast majority of the countries of this world. As a matter of fact, I think there's only 5, or actually 4 here, that it doesn't. Bhutan, Maldives, People's Republic of China, and the People's Republic of Korea. So this whore in Revelation 17 is committing fornication with the kings of the earth. If you do a Google image search of the Pope meeting with foreign dignitaries, you'll see that most of the time the kings and the presidents and the rulers that come to meet the Pope, they all wear black suits or dark colored suits, while the Pope is dressed in white. If you study witchcraft, that's a sign of submission. That's a pagan witchcraft symbol. The high authority wears white, and his subordinates wear darker colors. So they're recognizing popery as the highest authority. And as a matter of fact, in the UN, the Vatican is given a preeminence because they claim that she's the oldest country, and so she has authority. So, and the European Union, when they signed the Declaration of the European Union, I don't know if they call it a constitution or what they call it, but when they signed it underneath a gigantic demonic statue of the Pope. So this Roman Catholicism has committed fornication with numerous kings of the earth. In Revelation 17:4, it states that this whore is decked out in red and purple, scarlet and purple. And you can just go to Google Images and type in Roman Catholicism cardinals and bishops, and you'll see they're all decked out in red and purple. Those are the colors of the Roman Catholic institution. All the time you'll see him, and I'm sure you're familiar with that. Anytime you see a cardinal, he's wearing red. Anytime you see a bishop, he's wearing purple. Those are the colors identified in Revelation 17 as the colors of the whore of Babylon. In Revelation 17:4, it says that this whore is decked out in gold and precious stones and pearls. If you do a Google image search or a Bing search, just type in Vatican riches, and you'll see just countless images of cathedrals decked out in gold and pearl. I think I've heard that it said that the Vatican is the richest landowning nation in the world. Artwork, gold, pearls, just filthy riches, land. Roman Catholicism is the richest institution. And I can't guarantee that. I haven't seen stats on that. That's something I've just heard. But she is definitely decked out in gold and pearls, just like Revelation 17 says. In Revelation 17:5, this whore is identified as Mystery Babylon. And Mystery Babylon was an actual religion, the Babylonian mystery religions. And if you do a comparison of the Mystery Babylon religion with the current Roman Catholic religion, you'll find numerous similarities. As a matter of fact, a book was written about this called The Tale of Two Babylons by Alexander Hislop. And in there, he gives documented examples of numerous similarities between the Babylonian mystery religions and current Roman Catholic rituals. I'll give you an example here. If you go to WordPress, go to Biblepedia, I think is how you say it. It's Biblepedia. You can go to a WordPress document called, and I guess you just Google this. Just Google Nimrod Part 14 WordPress. And you're going to find an article in there. And it says here, the following are excerpted from the 1825 book, The Two Babylons. So it gives you an example from that book, and I'm just going to read a little bit of it here. It says, it has been known all along that popery was baptized paganism, but God is now making it manifest that the paganism which Rome has baptized, or has been baptized in all its essential elements, the very paganism which prevailed in the ancient literal Babylon, that the essential character of her system, the grand objects of her worship, her festivals, her doctrine and discipline, her rites and ceremonies, her priesthood and their order, have all been derived from ancient Babylon. And finally, that the Pope himself is truly and properly the lineal representative of Belshazzar. The language applied to the New Testament Babylon, i.e. the Roman Catholic institution, as the reader cannot fail to see, naturally leads us back to the Babylon of the ancient world. As the apocalyptic woman, which he's talking about, Revelation 17, has in her hand a cup wherewith she intoxicates the nations, so it was with the Babylon of old. And then he quotes Jeremiah here, Babylon hath been a golden cup in the Lord's hand, that made all the earth drunken. The nations have drunken of her wine, therefore the nations are mad. Now, if it be inquired what was the object and design of these ancient mysteries, it will be found that there was a wonderful analogy between them and that mystery of iniquity which is embodied in the Church of Rome. Their primary object was to introduce privately, by little and little, under the seal of secrecy and the sanction of an oath, what it wouldn't have been safe all at once and openly to propound. What he's saying there is Catholicism has introduced these Babylonian mystery rites and religions piece by piece. The Chaldean mysteries can be traced up to the days of Semiramis, who lived only a few centuries after the flood, the wife consort of Nimrod, and who is known to have impressed upon them the image of her own depraved and polluted mind. That beautiful but abandoned queen of Babylon was not only herself a paragon of unbridled lust and licentiousness, but in the mysteries which she had a chief hand in forming, she was worshipped as Rhea, the great mother of the gods, with such atrocious rites as identified her with Venus, the mother of all impurity, and raised the very city where she had reigned to a bad eminence among the nations, as the grand seat at once of idolatry and consecrated prostitution. Thus was this Chaldean queen a fit and remarkable prototype of the woman in the Apocalypse, with the golden cup in her hand and the name on her forehead, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And then I'm not going to read this whole article here, but if you go to this website, you can see. And I've done a different video where I think I mentioned some of these, or if not, I'm going to in the future. But for instance, the rosary beads, the statues, December 25th being the birth of Christ, that's not biblical. That's nowhere mentioned in the Bible. That's actually Mystery Babylon. The birth of Tammuz was celebrated on December 25th. The Queen of Heaven, how they refer to Mary, that was this woman that's being referenced here. Just all these similarities, the IHS symbol that Roman Catholicism uses, the pagan mitre that the Pope wears. It looks like a fish's mouth if you look at it from the top down. That's the Babylonian Dagon mitre. They worship the fish god Dagon, the god of agriculture. And if you go and just type in, Dagon priests, you'll see that they wore that same outfit that the Pope wears. So all these different similarities between ancient mystery Babylon and then current Roman Catholicism. And I've just read articles about the book, The Tale of Two Babylons. I've got it on my bookshelf. I just haven't had time to read it yet. But it's, if you just look at the articles, and you can find them anywhere with a Google search, compare Mystery Babylon with Roman Catholicism, it's pretty shocking. So to summarize, the Roman Catholic Church and its head, the Pope, identify themselves as the Antichrist when they call themselves the Vicar of Christ. That word vicar means anti, substitute. So they're specifically identifying themselves as the Antichrist. One of the titles, that Vicarius Filii Dei, that's supposedly assigned to the Pope and means Antichrist or anti-God, calculates to 666. which Revelation 13 tells us. Here is wisdom. Calculate the number of the beast. It's the number of a man, and its number is 666. Vicarious Phila Dei equals 666. She fits all the descriptive texts from Revelation 17. In addition, she thinks to change times and laws. Daniel talks about a little horn, which I would argue is the same thing as Antichrist, same thing as the beast, same thing as the woman who rides the beast. There might be a subtle difference there in that the beast is this all-encompassing worldwide government, worldwide policy of Antichrist philosophy, and then the woman that rides the beast is the woman who controls it, the one who directs it, and that would be Roman Catholicism, which is also the man of sin from 2 Thessalonians, and the little horn from Daniel. But in Daniel 7:25, it specifically mentions that this little horn will think to change times and laws. Roman Catholicism does that when she claims to have the authority to change the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday. That's not biblical. There's no Bible verse that authorizes that. She just arbitrarily said, hey, the Sabbath is now on Sunday. Why did she do that? Because she wanted the pagans who worshiped the sun god on Sundays to be comfortable coming into the Christian church. So they said, hey, let's just worship on Sunday like they do, and we'll call it the Sabbath. And that's exactly what Daniel said, that this beast, this little horn, this whore of Babylon would think to have the power to do that, to change times and laws. She also thinks to change the laws by eliminating one of the 10 commandments. If you get a Catholic Bible and you go to the 10 commandments, you're going to find one missing. They took out the second commandment that says, thou shalt not worship any graven images, because they want you to worship their statues. They want you to bow down to their images. So they got rid of that commandment, and then they took the 10th commandment about not coveting and broke it into 2 parts so that they would still deceptively have 10. So she thought to change times and laws, just like Daniel told us she would. She violates and contradicts the scriptures at almost every point. Calling men father, calling the priests and the Pope father, which is a violation of Matthew 23:9, forbidding to eat meats on Fridays, and forbidding their priests to marry, which is a violation of 1 Timothy 4:3. They claim to re-sacrifice Christ at every Mass, which is a violation, a blasphemous violation of Hebrews 9:28 and all of Hebrews 10. She blasphemies God at every turn. Let's see here. I got something linked here. I don't know what this is. Okay, so if you go to worldslastchance.com, which I can't vouch for this website. It looks like they're a flat earth website, which is nonsense. So I don't know anything about this website. I'm not vouching for what they believe, but they have a good article on there which says, what are some of the blasphemous titles which have been used by the popes of the Roman Catholic Church? And you can go through there and you can read some of the blasphemous titles. My last video, I also went through some of those blasphemous titles as well. And then she also exalts herself above God, which is what the man of sin does in 2 Thessalonians 2:4. The list goes on and on. I think the evidence is pretty clear. But the Jesuits, which is the secret society of the Catholic institution, the Jesuits were trained as a counter-reformation. The Reformation started when people like Martin Luther, John Calvin, and others like that. I can't think of any other off the top of my head for some reason right now. Zwingli and... anyways, you know who the reformers are, but when they started the Reformation, it was because they finally got their hands on the scriptures. Rome had done a wonderful job of forbidding people to read the Bible or own the Bible, and there wasn't a printing press, so the Bibles weren't easily accessible, and they read them in Latin, which nobody spoke, so nobody knew what was going on. That's why that whole period of time was called the Dark Ages. The lamp of the light of the Word of God had been quenched and silenced by Rome, so that people didn't know what the Bible said. They had to just trust Roman Catholicism to tell them the truth. They had to trust the priests. And so all these blasphemies over the years, piece by piece, had been brought into Roman Catholicism, to the point when Martin Luther came around, it was horrible. It was a wicked, wicked, evil society. And so people like Martin Luther got their hands on the scriptures and started reading it and started going, whoa, what we're being told is not true. There's something crazy going on here. And so they started the Reformation. At first, they tried to reform from within. They tried to fix Roman Catholicism. But when they saw that couldn't be done, they broke off and started the Protestant Reformation, which is in protest. That's what Protestant means, in protest of Rome, saying this institution's corrupt, it's evil, it's wicked, it's the Antichrist, and people need to get out of it. Rome tried to put that down by force, started the Inquisition, where they would kill and torture anybody who was found with a Bible, or anybody who refused to submit to her ordinances, would persecute and murder Christians. And that's Fox's Book of the Martyrs. And in another place, I think it was said that during that entire period of time when Rome controlled Europe, over 50 million Bible-believing Christians were killed. And that's why Revelation 17 says that she's drunk on the blood of the saints. But when they saw that the Inquisition wasn't working, they started the Society of Jesus, which was started by Ignatius Loyola. And that's the Jesuit society. It was a more subtle, more conniving, more under the radar trickery form of Inquisition. And you can go and you can read the Oath of the Jesuits. I think it's in the Congressional Library. You can get your hands on that and read it. It's horrible, where they threaten death and blood and violence, and they're told to lie and cheat. And basically what Ignatius Loyola taught his people was demonic spiritual exercises to quench their conscience, to silence their conscience, so that they could do wicked and evil acts in the name of popery, in the name of Rome, to stop the Reformation, to stop the Protestants. And they were told 3 specific areas that they're trained to infiltrate. They were trained to infiltrate government, the schools, and the churches. So in the government, they would become politicians and introduce policy that would favor Rome, that would and that's why the kings of the earth commit fornication with her. They submit to the Vatican. They're friends with the Vatican. And then they would infiltrate the schools and take over the seminaries and get, positions of authority there and introduce Catholic doctrine slowly. And then they would infiltrate the churches and take over leadership there, become pastors and take over the pulpit. And they're taught to the Baptist, become a Baptist. To the Calvinist, become a Calvinist. To the Lutheran, become a Lutheran. Through that trickery, they would slowly introduce Catholic dogma, Catholic doctrine. And so now you're at the point where most of Christians don't look to Rome as the Antichrist anymore. And you have a major push of ecumenicalism, where people like Rick Warren or Todd White or Chuck Colson or Billy Graham make friends with the Roman Catholic Church and say, oh, it's just another branch of denomination. It's just another branch of Christianity. We can be friends with them, to the point where now you have Christians say, hey, as long as we're together on abortion, as long as we're together on marriage, we can stand together, forsaking the gospel, which is the fundamental issue of unity. If we're not unified on the gospel, then we're to reject fellowship. That whore of Babylon still holds to policies that want to kill Bible-believing Christians, but she doesn't have the authority and power to do so, so she's quiet. She's more subtle. But if and when Roman Catholicism regains power, she is going to slaughter Christians again for refusing to bow to her policy, for refusing to worship her statues, for refusing to kiss the hand of her pope, for refusing to admit that cookie they hold up is somehow magically the actual body of Christ. And because we refuse to bow to those blasphemous policies, because we refuse to partake in that anti-Christ idolatry, we're going to be killed by her again. That's coming. But right now, she doesn't have that kind of power, and at least in America. I'm sure that kind of stuff goes on in like Mexico and Spain. You can read Charles Spurgeon's, I think, quote on that, or Chinkay's book, 50 Years in the Church of Rome. But anyways, the Jesuits have done their job over the last 100 years or so, because Napoleon banished popery in the late 1800s, and took the Vatican away from her. A deadly wound, like Revelation talks about, was given to her. But in 1929, the Lateran Council Treaty was signed, and they gave Vatican back to the Pope. The deadly wound was healed. There was even a newspaper headline put out when that happened that used that exact verbiage, the deadly wound healed, a direct quote from the book of Revelation. But since 1929, Roman Catholicism has slowly been gaining power again. Like I said, now the EU was signed underneath the statue of the Pope. Our rulers and leaders are going and meeting with the Pope and kissing his hand. We have so-called church leaders meeting with the Pope and kissing his feet and kissing his ring and reunifying with this institution. So she's again regaining power and influence. But anyways, the Jesuits have done such a masterful job of influencing the church with their fictional, futurist, pre-tribulation rapture lie that the church seems to ignore all the evidence pointing to the real Antichrist, and instead they're blindly looking forward to some future political ruler. Because of the Left Behind books and because of all that nonsense. I've got several videos exposing the pre-tribulation error and giving evidence for the post-tribulation view, historical post-tribulation view, which is what the church believed before in the 1800s, before this pre-tribulation nonsense came in, which was introduced by the Jesuits, a book written by a Jesuit priest, Rabbi Ben Ezra. He used a Jewish name to trick Protestants into thinking that he was a converted Jew, but it was really a Jesuit priest who said, and that was the Jesuit plan. Back to that Reformation thing, when they saw that persecution wasn't working, they said, hey, because people like Martin Luther and John Calvin and whatnot were calling out Rome as the Antichrist. And people were waking up, and the printing press was invented, and now Bibles were available all over the place. So people could read for themselves, and they were seeing the errors in the Catholic institution, and they were coming out. Catholicism was losing its power, losing its sway over Europe. And so the Jesuits said, we've got to find a way to counter this Reformation. And so the Counter-Reformation was instituted by the Jesuits. And one of the things they did, one of the main tenets they said is, we've got to get attention off of Rome as the Antichrist. We're being clearly identified as the Antichrist. We need to get people thinking about something else. And so they went to Daniel chapter 9, and they twisted Daniel 9:25 through 27 and made it seem like that was talking about some futuristic Antichrist. And so they said, see, Rome can't be the Antichrist. It's talking about the future. It's talking about some future political ruler. It's not talking about Rome. And now, since the 1800s and the Plymouth Brethren, and then it getting introduced into the, what was that study Bible in the 50s that everybody had? I can't think of the name of it. The Schofield Reference Bible. In the 50s, that was such a big thing. Like, everybody had to have the Schofield Reference Bible. And he introduced the errors of the Plymouth Brethren, this futuristic look to the Antichrist, into his footnotes. And so now, and that's spread, and now the Jesuits are in the seminaries, the Jesuits are in the pulpits, teaching this futuristic Antichrist nonsense, promoting this. And the church now is seeming to ignore the clear biblical evidence that we just went through, like Revelation 17, like Daniel 7, like a proper understanding of Daniel 9, like 2 Thessalonians where it talks about the man of sin. All this clear biblical evidence that points to the real Antichrist, and instead they're looking blindly forward to this coming dictator. Now, that's not to say that there's not going to be, eventually when Rome takes over the world, there is going to be, whoever's pope at that time is going to take complete control. So there is a future coming totalitarian essence of the Antichrist. But the Antichrist has always been present with us. Jesus said, many will come in my name deceiving. And we've had a long history of popes coming in his name deceiving. Antichrist has always been with us. She's just currently subdued after her near-death blow in 1798 when Napoleon conquered Rome and banished the Pope. And you can look that up in Wikipedia. Just look up Napoleon and the Catholic Church. But since 1929, when her land was restored through that Lateran Treaty, she has been regaining her power and influence. Okay, and I've got that newspaper article linked here. The San Francisco Chronicle on Tuesday, February 12th, 1929, exploded with the headlines, Mussolini and Gaspari sign historic Roman pact, healed wound of many years. And that's when Rome was given back the Vatican and started regaining her power. Protestants may have forgotten the Dark Ages, but Rome hasn't. She still claims that authority. And as soon as she has the power, you had better believe that she's going to enforce it. She will cause everybody, the whole world, to take a mark of allegiance, the mark of the beast in your hand or forehead, without which you won't be able to buy or sell. And we're going to have a new Dark Ages. But the difference is now technology has advanced to the point where she'll be able to enforce this worldwide without resistance. To resist is going to mean to flee or to die. We're going to be cut off from society when the entire world moves to a cashless banking society, which we already see. I mean, everybody's credit card or debit card has that microchip in it. You can, and they have the RFID technology to put an implantable microchip in everybody, and that's what they're planning to do. You can research that. There's government documents on that. Our own governments are stating that they want to use that technology to implant everybody with a microchip, and banking will be tied into it so that you'll just swipe your implanted microchip under the scanner and you'll be able to do all your banking with that microchip. And when Rome takes over power, it's an interesting thing to study. Within this beast system that's being created across the world, you have a political branch and you have the religious branch. And at some parts it seems like they're in opposition. At some parts it seems like they're working together. But in that political branch, you have people like the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the DuPonts, the Kennedys, ruling every industry, controlling the steel, controlling the oil, controlling auto manufacturing, controlling the media, controlling the schools, and moving everything towards a one world government. And then you have Rome slowly taking over control again, moving everything towards one world religion. Like in 2000, you can look this up too, she invited all the different religions to come and meet. And so you had Buddhists doing Buddhist prayers, you had Hindus doing their Hindu prayers, you had Native Americans doing their pagan rituals, all under the branch of Roman Catholicism, all with the Pope overseeing the whole thing. As a matter of fact, I think the Dalai Lama gave the prayer at that meeting. But it's all moving towards this one world system that Revelation talks about. And it's kind of like the political and the religious are jockeying for power. Like a lot of people call the political authority the Illuminati, the Rothschild families, the Rockefellers, and so on. It seems like they're trying to take control, while also the Jesuits are pulling for popery control. But Revelation 17 says the woman will ride the beast. But then also Revelation talks about at some point the world turning against her. So you can study that out for yourself. But I could be wrong on this. You know, perhaps our modern church is right, and we're looking for some dictator to come in the future. But if I'm wrong, I'm not the only one that says this. I'm going to go now and I'm going to list numerous church fathers, big names throughout church history, and quotes from them. And you can look these quotes up as well. Martin Luther said, "I know that the Pope is Antichrist, and his seat is that of Satan himself." Luther also said, "The papacy is a general chase by command of the Roman pontiff for the purpose of running down and destroying souls." John Calvin said, "We call the Roman pontiff Antichrist." John Wesley said, "He is in an emphatic sense the man of sin." He's talking about the Pope, "as he increases all manner of sin above all measure." John Knox said, the Pope should be recognized as the very Antichrist. Martin Luther's works, this is a book, Martin Luther's Works, Table Talk, volume 54, number 4487, page 346. He said, I believe the Pope is the masked and incarnate devil because he is the Antichrist. Charles Spurgeon, quoted in Ian Paisley's book, Spurgeon on Antichrist, said, it is the bounden duty of every Christian to pray against the Antichrist. As to what that Antichrist is, no sane man ought to raise a question. If it be not the popery in the Church of Rome, there is nothing in the world that can be called by that name. The Westminster Confession of Faith, chapter 25 on the Church, says the Pope is that Antichrist, that man of sin and son of perdition, that exalteth himself in the Church. The Westminster Confession of Faith, along with the Savoy Confession, the Old Baptist Confession, and the Methodist Confession views of John Wesley, all believed the same thing. The men who wrote the King James Version of the Bible believed the same thing, and they dedicated the writing to the king for allowing the writing in defense of this truth. In the foreword of the King James Bible is 1611. It says, which hath given such a blow unto that man of sin as will not be healed. And they were talking about popery. The view of the Antichrist being not just one man, but an office of a man, was first written about by John Wycliffe. And again, I mentioned this earlier in Matthew 24:3. The disciples had asked for a sign of the end, and Jesus said, many will come in my name, saying, I am Christ. When Pope says vicar of Christ, he's calling himself Christ, and deceive many. And in fact, I'm going to give you some quotes here where the Pope calls himself Christ. John Wycliffe believed, like I do, that the many was the popes who declared themselves Christ. It's interesting to find what Abraham Lincoln said about the Civil War here. I'm going to quote two quotes from Abraham Lincoln from the book 50 Years in the Church of Rome by Charles Cinque in 1968, which is a reprint of the 1886 edition. Abraham Lincoln said, this war would never have been possible without the sinister influence of the Jesuits. We owe it to popery that we now see our land reddened with the blood of her noblest sons. Though there were great differences of opinion between the South and North on the question of slavery, neither Jeff Davis nor any one of the leading men of the Confederacy would have dared to attack the North had they not relied on the promise of the Jesuits that under the mask of democracy, the money and the arms of the Roman Catholics, even the arms of France, were at their disposal if they would attack us. And then Lincoln also said, the Protestants of both the North and South would surely unite to exterminate the priests and the Jesuits if they could learn how the priests, the nuns, and the monks, which daily land on our shores under the pretext of preaching their religion, are nothing else but the emissaries of the Pope, of Napoleon III, and the other despots of Europe, to undermine our institutions, alienate the hearts of our people from our Constitution and our laws, destroy our schools, and prepare a reign of anarchy here, as they have done in Ireland, in Mexico, in Spain, and wherever there are any people who want to be free. In an 1816 letter written from President John Adams to President Thomas Jefferson, it said, shall we not have regular swarms of them here, in as many disguises as only a king of the gypsies can assume, dressed as painters, publishers, writers, and schoolmastery? If ever there was a body of men who merited eternal damnation on earth and in hell, it is the Society of Loyolas, the Jesuits. In 1691, Thomas Hobbes wrote in a book, Leviathan, papacy is no other than the ghost of the deceased Roman Empire. In 1845, John Dowling wrote in the book The History of Romanism on page 541, estimations indicate 50 million people have been slaughtered by popish persecutors for heresy. In 1987, J.E.C. Shepard, in the book The Babington Plot, wrote on page 12, between 1555 and 1931, the Society of Jesuits was expelled from at least 83 countries, city-states, and cities. In 1886, again 50 years in the Church of Rome by Charles Cinque, the Jesuits were responsible for the killing of Abraham Lincoln. Edmund Paris, in the book The Secret History of the Jesuits on page 164, said the SS organization had been constituted according to the principles of the Jesuit order. Hitler referred to Heimlich Himmler as his Ignatius Loyola, obtaining the swastika at a Catholic abbey, and priest Marsh Hagen. Pope Innocent III said this about himself in Decretals of Gregory IX, Book 1, Chapter 3. The Pope holdeth place on earth, not simply of a man, but of a true God. That's blasphemy of the highest order. The Pope's calling himself God. That's Antichrist. Pope Nicholas, in a book by Josiah Pratt called The Church Historians of England Reformation Period, published in 1856, on page 159, quoted Pope Nicholas as saying the following: I am in all and above all, so that God himself and I, the vicar of God, hath both one consistory, and I am able to do almost all that God can do. I then, being above all, seem by this reason to be above all gods. Who could hear that and remain a Catholic? That's such wicked blasphemy. Pope Nicholas, again, in that book by Pratt, said, Wherefore, no marvel if it be in my power to dispense with all things, yea, with the precepts of Christ. He even says here that he can overrule the commandments of Jesus, that he has the power to change times and laws, essentially, to say, I can do away with the precepts of Christ. Pope St. Pius X, I think this is a letter he wrote called Evangelical Christendom, on January 1st, 1895, published in London by J.S. Phillips on page 15, said, The Pope is not simply the representative of Jesus Christ. On the contrary, he is Jesus Christ himself, under the veil of flesh. Does the Pope speak? It is Jesus Christ who is speaking. Hence, when anyone speaks of the Pope, it is not necessary to examine, but to obey. It just makes you angry to read this kind of nonsense. Pope Pius IX, on the History of the Christian Church by Henry Charles Sheldon on page 59, quoted Pope Pius IX as saying this: I alone am the successor of the apostles, the vicar of Jesus Christ. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Pope Boniface VIII, in a Unum Sanctum, as cited in Apostolic Digest, Book 5, the Book of Obedience, said this: We declare, say, define, and pronounce that it is absolutely necessary for the salvation of every human creature to be subject to the Roman Pontiff. It's crazy to think that the modern church has forgotten this stuff. It's like we just ignore this somehow. And I guess it's because the Jesuits have taken over the seminaries. They don't teach this. So people who want to be pastors, they go to school to learn. They're not exposed to this. They're not taught this about our Protestant faith. This ought to be Protestantism 101. We ought to know who our enemy is. Pope Clement VI, in Super Quibusdom, as cited in Apostolic Digest, Book 5, the Book of Obedience, said, "No man outside obedience to the Pope of Rome can ultimately be saved. All who have raised themselves against the faith of the Roman Church and died in final impenitence have been damned and gone down to hell." Pope John the 23rd in 1958, during the coronation homily on November 4th, 1958, said this: "Into this fold of Jesus Christ no man may enter unless he be led by the sovereign pontiff, and only if they be united to him can men be saved." So they're saying anybody outside of Rome can't be saved, anybody outside of the Catholic institution. Pope John Paul II in 1984, so this is a recent pope. And again, it doesn't matter if it's recent or past, because they claim the popes are infallible. So whatever the popes have said is true forever. It can't be changed. Pope John Paul II in 1984, quoted by Professor Arthur Noble in the Pope's Apology, published online by the European Institute of Protestant Studies, said this: "Don't go to God for forgiveness of sins. Come to me." And this was quoted in the Los Angeles Times on December 12, 1984. It says here, rebutting a belief widely shared by Protestants and a growing number of Roman Catholics, Pope John Paul II dismissed the widespread idea that one can obtain forgiveness directly from God. That's horrible. He's saying, don't go to God to ask for forgiveness. Come to the Pope. Martin Luther's book, Martin Luther's Works, Table Talk, volume 54, number 441, page 330, said this: "The Pope, possessed by demons, defends his tyranny with the canon Si Papa, yes, Father. This canon states clearly, if the Pope should lead the whole world into the control of hell, he is nevertheless not to be contradicted. It is a terrible thing that on account of the authority of this man we must lose our souls, which Christ redeemed with his precious blood." Sorry, here I got a scratchy throat. Again, from the book The Babington Plot by J.E. Shepherd on page 12, "The Jesuits are known for their deception, spying, infiltration, assassination, and revolution. They worked deep into the political field and plotted through politics through the world countries." A quote from Engineer Corps of Hell says it was the Jesuits that took credit for the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. Again, Abraham Lincoln, as quoted in that book 50 Years of the Church of Rome on page 496, said, "It is not against the Americans of the South alone that I am fighting. It is more against the Pope of Rome, his perfidious Jesuits, and their blind and bloodthirsty slaves that we have to defend ourselves." In The Secret History of the Jesuits by Edmund Paris on page 164, said the SS organization has been constituted according to the principles of the Jesuit order. Again, from that same book on page 163, quotes words that were published on May 3rd, 1945, the day of Hitler's death, in the Reform under the authority of Francisco Franco, the Spanish dictator during World War II. So this was published, I guess, in a Spanish newspaper, a eulogy about Adolf Hitler. It says here, "Adolf Hitler, son of the Catholic Church, died while defending Christianity. It is therefore understandable that words cannot be found to lament over his death, when so many were found to exalt his life. Over his mortal remains stands his victorious moral figure. With the palm of the martyr, God gives Hitler the laurels of victory." Stated by the Jesuits during World War II, in the book by Paris, The Secret History of the Jesuits, on page 164, "The building up of the Third Reich unites a national socialist state to Catholic Christianity." Again, from 50 Years in the Church of Rome, quoting former Jesuit General Michelangelo Tamburini, says, "See, sir, from this chamber I govern not only Paris, but to China, not only to China, but to all the world, without anyone knowing how I do it. And I'm going to give you the quote now, the Jesuit oath. And you can find this in the Library of Congress. This is cited by Edwin Sherman in the Engineer Corps of Hell in 1883. So this is the oath the Jesuits take. It says, "My son, heretofore you have been taught to act the dissembler. Among the reformers, to be a reformer. Among the Calvinists, to be a Calvinist. Among the Protestants, to be a Protestant. And obtaining their confidence, to seek even to preach from their pulpits. You have been taught your duty as a spy, to ingratiate yourself into the confidence of heretics, of every class and character, as well as among the schools and universities. I furthermore promise and declare that I will, when opportunity presents, make and wage relentless war, secretly or openly, against all heretics, Protestants, and liberals, as I am directed to do, to extirpate and exterminate them from the face of the whole earth, that when the same cannot be done openly, I will secretly use the poisoned cup, the strangulating cord, the steel of the poignard, or the leaden bullet, as I at any time may be directed to do by any agent of the Pope or superior of the Society of Jesus." The Jesuit superior then says, "Go ye then into all the world and take possession of all lands in the name of the Pope. He who will not accept him as the vicar of Jesus and as his vice-regent on earth, let him be accursed and exterminated." In The Rulers of Evil by F. Tupper Saucy, on page 65, he wrote, "By 1556, 3/4 of the Society's memberships were dedicated in 46 Jesuit colleges to learning against learning, to indoctrinate minds with the learning of illuminated humanism as opposed to the learning of Scripture. This network would expand by 1749 to 669 colleges, 176 seminaries, 61 houses of study, and 24 universities, partly or wholly under Jesuit direction. That was in 1749. Think about their influence here 300 years later. I would argue that they probably have influence over the vast majority of universities, seminaries, churches, political branches, and governments. And as a matter of fact, in Revelation 17, it says that the Roman Catholicism, this whore of Babylon, is the mother of all harlots. Harlots, in spiritual sense, are false religions, false ideologies. She's the mother of them. The Jesuits are behind all the false teachings, all the false cults, all the false religions. She is the Antichrist. And the evidence is overwhelming. The biblical scriptural evidence that point to who this is clear. Our church fathers knew it. The Protestant Reformation knew it. They knew who this whore was. They knew who the Antichrist was. And they tried to warn people. That's what the Protestant Reformation was all about. We've lost that touch in the modern church. We've lost that vision. And to the point where now we're even trying to stand with the Roman Catholic institution. And we need to be Protestants again. We need to continue to protest against the whore. We need to continue to warn people against its evil, unbiblical, blasphemous idolatries, and to call for people to come out of that wickedness, to repent and to turn from their sins, to turn from that religion. It's unbiblical. It's the Antichrist. I would recommend that you go to a website called JesusIsLord.com. This again is one that I can't vouch for. I don't know a lot about it. There is a lot of good information on false religions, but one thing they have is a good article called the Antichrist Slideshow. So if you go to JesusIsLord.com, and it's separated by hyphens, so Jesus-is-Lord.com, and search for Antichrist Slideshow. It'll take you through some images with great information on who the Antichrist is. But I'm of the old Protestant Reformation faith. I believe and I don't fully understand eschatology. I don't understand how everything ties in together. I try my best to piece it together. Revelation is difficult. But I do believe that the man of sin, the little horn, the whore of Babylon, the Antichrist is Roman Catholicism. And how that's going to turn in the end and how that's going to tie in with the beast system. I believe the beast system is the one world government that's coming, and how Roman Catholicism ties in with Illuminism and the occultism and the political arm of that. I'm not really sure, but they're all aiming towards an Antichrist Luciferic agenda, and popery is running the show. The Pope is the Antichrist. Roman Catholicism is the institution of the Antichrist, and we need to resist that. We need to expose that, and we need to plead with Roman Catholics to come out to be saved, because most of the people that are in there are just there because of tradition, because that's what they were raised in. That's what their family has always done. So that's where they go. They don't understand these things. They don't see the wickedness. They don't understand that Jesus said, "If you love me, obey me." You can't contradict the scriptures and call yourself a Christian institution. And Roman Catholicism stands opposed to the scriptures. The word anti doesn't just mean substitute, it means opposed. So she is opposed. She's anti-Bible. She's anti-Christ, anti-God. And the Pope is the devil in the flesh. I believe that. When I look in that man's eyes, that's just pure evil in that man's eyes. And so that's the seed of Antichrist. It's what the church fathers believed. It's what I believe. And I hope this helps, kind of expose you to it, to open your eyes. Do the research. Don't just take my word for it. Don't just take the old church reformers, although that is a good indication. If these major men of church history, these godly men believe this, from Martin Luther to John Calvin to John Knox to John Wesley, to Jonathan Edwards to George Whitefield to Charles Spurgeon, all these old men of the past believed this for a reason. So we need to understand that and research this out for ourselves. And I think it's pretty clear. Some eschatology is tricky, but Revelation 17 is crystal clear. That can only be referring to one institution. There is no doubt. The little horn is pretty crystal clear about who that's talking about. And so I would just suggest you research it out for yourself and see for yourself. But that's what I got. Thank you for watching. Again, subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can watch this and all my videos at your convenience. King Ram 417. That's K, my middle initial. Ingram, my last name. 417. Thanks for watching. I love you guys. Talk to you next time.